Tensions are escalating between the two Sudans over the oil fields along their shared border. We ask, are Sudan and South Sudan heading for war? And what are the implications for both countries? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Well, the latest escalation of violence along the Sudanese border is among the worst since South Sudan became independent in July. Talks between the two countries are stalled as both sides accuse the other of launching attacks in the disputed border area. The Heglig oil region has been targeted in a series of attacks in recent weeks. Sudan described the offensive as severe, saying its Heglig oil fields were deliberately targeted and warned the South of a full-on confrontation. The South Sudanese army says the town of Teshwin near Heglig was hit on Monday, but Sudan says it came under attack first. Another hope for peace stalled last week. Khartoum called off a planned summit in Juba between President Omar al-Bashir and South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. Well, although South Sudan gained its independence last year, there are a number of issues between the two countries which have not been resolved. They include their shared border, which is still not clearly marked, the status of Abyei, also near the border, that was left undecided in the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement. Abyei accounts for roughly 13% of oil exports. After the split, South Sudan ended up with most of the oil fields, around 75% of Sudan's total production of oil. But it has to export the oil using pipelines through ports in Sudan's territory. However, no deal has been reached on how to divide up the oil revenues. Also, the issue of citizenship remains unresolved. Both sides reject dual citizenship, and Sudan has said that Southerners will not enjoy citizenship rights and jobs in the country. All right, before we bring in our panel of guests, let's speak to Al Jazeera correspondent Nazanin Moshiri from the South Sudanese capital, Juba. Nazanin, thanks for being with us. I know you were at the front line last week when an Al Jazeera crew were with the SPLA when they came under attack from Sudanese warplanes. Tell us more about that and what the mood is like right now in Juba.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you about the mood in Juba, and people are extremely concerned about the tough words they are hearing on both sides and whether this really does mean war. These people have gone through decades of civil war, and this new nation really started off so positively back in July. But what has happened is that they've stopped their production of oil. The country is really living off its oil reserves and also off international loans. So people are deeply concerned about what all of this will mean. At the same time, up in Unity State, where I was with an Al Jazeera crew, and we came under attack by what we believe were Sudanese warplanes. We were with the oil minister of South Sudan and also various South Sudanese army officials. It really is a tense and volatile situation there. The South Sudanese, whatever they say, are stretched on the ground, and they're facing a formidable force in Sudan, which has MiG fighters and also Antonov planes, and they are superior in the air, which makes life very difficult for the South Sudanese army on the ground. Now, we saw dead bodies there on the ground as well, which we believe belonged to the the Sudanese armed forces. They were killed in clashes, and it is a really bloody situation up there. There are various casualties in hospitals in and around Unity State, and it's a developing situation which could get worse.
Nazanin, what's at stake here for the two sides fighting? If, as many people fear, this could break out into a larger war?
What's at stake is money and oil, really, and lives. Oil, as I mentioned, for South Sudan, crucial. It makes up 98% of its total revenue. And for Sudan, Heglig, the site that the South Sudanese have now gone into, it makes up more than half of Sudan's entire oil production output. So put those things together and you're looking at a dire economic situation for both sides. And of course, the casualties that we're looking at as well on both sides. So a huge human and economic cost.
All right, Nazanin, we'll let you get back to covering events there for us. Nazanin Moshiri in Juba, many thanks. So, are the two Sudans heading for war? Well, to answer this question, we're joined by our three guests in Juba. Atem, the Deputy Information Minister of South Sudan. In Oxford, we have David Anderson, a Professor of African Politics at Oxford University. And joining us on the line from Khartoum, Dr. Ibrahim Ghandour, Chairman of the Foreign Relations Sector in Sudan. Dr. Ghandour, if I could start with you, how did this start for Khartoum, and what is at stake here for your country?
In fact, it started directly in March, but the conflict started early on following the cessation by Juba housing rebel movers from Darfur, as well as what is called SPLA North. Following the cessation, SPLM left 2 battalions of its forces in Blue Nile and South Kordofan, and according to the CPA, it was supposed to be disarmed. But against the implementation of the CPA, SPLM didn't do that. Something that has left behind a bomb that was about to, that can be detained anytime. And so what happened is that Juba started its war attacks against the borders of Sudan, and they attacked his league many times. The last one was 10 days ago, and until they attacked the league 2 days ago, we have been informing the African Union as well as the international community on the breach taking place by the government of the South, and what the SPLA is doing in supporting the rebels, in sometimes launching direct attacks on our borders. But unfortunately, neither Juba nor the international community managed to stop those aggressions until they entered Hidlib yesterday in a direct act of aggression against the territory of Sudan. Unfortunately, I heard sometimes some official leaders from Juba talking about Hidlib as if it is part of Sudan. According to the CPA and according to international borders, Hidlib is 72 kilometers north of South Sudan borders, as it has been stated on the 1st of January 1956. And we are now looking forward for the international community to condemn that act of aggression. We are not looking for war. We sacrifice part of our land, part of our people in order to achieve peace by signing the CPA. We implemented to the maximum best implementation, but we ended up with separation as well as an act of aggression. We feel that Juba is neither acting on behalf of its people, on behalf of the interests of its country. They are acting on behalf of other actors who don't want stability for the region, who don't want stability for Africa. Some of them are looking for resources and using Juba in a proxy war, which is not in the interest of both countries or both people. We look for peace, but we will defend our territory.
Well, you talk about acts of aggression, and there are many people who would say, not just in South Sudan, that much of that has come from your government, and that this is what has led to this current situation. And many of the issues that you're talking about should have been resolved before July of last year, when South Sudan gained its independence from Sudan.
In fact, when we were discussing, when we were one state and 2 parties in the parliament, we were discussing South Sudan referendum bill, and at that time, with the advice of the international community and the African Union, we proposed to finalize and discuss all post-referendum issues and agree on it before the separation. But SPLM refused to accept that, and in fact, at the time they left the parliament and they were about to delay the referendum itself in a trial to avoid discussing those important issues, including disarmament of their forces, including borders issues, including economic issues, and they refused to agree on that, and they went on following the separation in long talks, and we were so patient. Although we felt that Juba is not looking for agreement from what their teams are doing. Not only that, Juba is now housing all rebel leaders in Juba. The war is now in our territory, in our land. So So if we were the aggressors, it could have been, the war could have been inside the territories of the South. They are attacking, and in the last speech of President Salva Kiir in front of the Liberation Council, he declared all of a sudden during his speech, now SPLA forces entered Idlib and we confiscated Idlib. And we all know that Idlib is not part of the South.
All right, I want to put some of that to. I want to put some. Thanks very much for that. I want to put some of that to our guest in Juba, Atem. Yeah, Atem, you've just been hearing from what our government spokesman in Khartoum has just said. What is your response to that? And I also want to ask you about the impression that the South Sudan government is trying to change the front with Sudan and impose a reality on the ground by force before any negotiations.
It's not true that we want to use force to change the reality on the ground. Instead, we are defending ourselves against the aggression from Khartoum. If you can recall, after the meeting in Addis Ababa and after the signing of the non-aggression agreement, Khartoum, just 2 days after that, started bombing the territories of South Sudan. This is an act of aggression, unless Dr. Ghandour doesn't understand the meaning of aggression. And they have been bombing our territories throughout until the last 2 days. They have been bombing the areas. One of them was last week when they bombed 3 times. The delegation led by the Minister of Petroleum and the Governor of Unity State and senior SPLM officer. Now, this one was witnessed by foreign media journalists who were there. So the planes from Khartoum bombed the areas inside South Sudan. How do you call that? Now, when the SPLM found that the territory is under threat, we have the right to defend ourselves. So what happened was to repulse the aggressors. And the president of the Republic, who happens to be the commander-in-chief of the SPLA, gave orders that the SPLA forces shouldn't get into the territory of Sudan in respect for their sovereignty. And we expect them to respond in kind.
All right, Ibrahim Ghandour, I want to put this back to you before we let you go. There is a history of your government in Khartoum, led by your ruling party, the National Congress, of resolving so many of the disputes in your country, whether it's about Darfur or whether it's about conflicts, whether disputes in the south of Sudan. There is a history of resolving these conflicts with violence. Given that, why should the government in South Sudan, or anyone else for that matter, trust your government to take part in any negotiations in good faith?
In fact, contrary to what you said, with all due respect, we are the only African government that went negotiating with all rebel movements and reaching deals. One of them is the CPA that led to the newborn state of the South to get into existence. Now I will ask 2 questions. Is Juba housing the rebel leaders right now from Darfur and from Blue Nile and South Kordofan? 2, are they supporting them with arms and personnel? 3, where are SPLA forces now? Are they in the territories of the Sudan, or are they south of 1956 borders? That can tell you who is the aggressor is. I know the meaning of the word aggression very well, and this is supported by evidence that has been forwarded to the African Union and to the international community. Cuba cannot deny that they are aggressing. Their president declared that they entered Idlib. Idlib is part of the North. It is part of Sudan. It was never, and it will never be part of South Sudan. So now Sudan is defending its own territory.
All right, Dr. Ibrahim Ghandour, chairman of the Foreign Relations Sector in Sudan. I know we're going to have to let you go at this point, so thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
David Anderson in Oxford, if I could turn to you on this. What is your impression of what we've seen in South Sudan over the last couple of days? And I'm going to put to you the question that we asked at the top of the show. Is there a danger of this conflict going into a full-scale war?
I think there's a very real danger indeed. What's happened is desperately depressing. Both governments could end up suffering very, very deeply and grievously as a consequence of this. I don't think either side can afford a war. I don't think either side really wants a war. But I also think that neither side knows how to stop a war. They've been fighting each other for so long, it's become a habit of mind as well as action. And it's exceedingly difficult to get one side to acknowledge the problems created for the other by their own actions. So everything we've just heard from each side of the political divide is true. Both sides have been guilty to a degree of meddling in the affairs of the other. And I think the important thing to note is that the oil field that has been, I think, taken by the South now, more or less admitted that they've taken it, Heglig, was one of the areas that was deeply disputed when the CPA was settled. The South did not like the fact that Heglig was put into the North, and the fact that things have really blown up in Heglig now is no surprise.
Atem, if I can turn back to you on this. How is this going to be resolved then? I mean, and if we talk about the Heglig oil field, it is responsible for half of the country's oil production. So there is a lot here at stake here, isn't there?
Well, the fact that the fighting is taking place around the disputed area is not surprising. Before we can talk of what to do next, let us go back to the history of this territory. The place is not actually called Heglig, it's called Panthau, which is the Dinka word for the village of the trees of that name. And this place was within the territory of South Sudan, according to the 1956 borders. Now, when the oil was discovered in that area in the early 1980s, the then president, Nimeri, started with redrawing the borders. So this area was cut to the north, and there was no mention whether the oil was in the north or in the south, but it was just direction, several hundreds of kilometers southwest of Khartoum. Now, again, when they opened the petroleum pipeline, the headquarters in 1997 was taken to this area, disputed area. And they started managing the oil business there as if this was a northern area. Then in 2003, they redrew the map, incorporating it into Western Kordofan state. And there is a letter to that written by Dr. Nafia Ali Nafia when he was in charge of federal affairs at the presidency, claiming that Heglig was not part of Unity State, but part of Western Kordofan. So the claim that this has been part of the North is completely not supported by facts, and the map is there to prove the claim by the South. But that's not the issue now. The issue is how do we stop this sort of impending war? We in the South are not for war. We want a negotiated settlement. And we also believe that the African Union can provide a mechanism where a just solution could be found to this conflict instead of armed solution. We are totally against war. It's not good for us. It's not good for the North. We have just emerged from war, and the country is barely developed. It was neglected by the North to develop it, despite all the resources we have. So the best way is to have peace, peace with ourselves, peace with the North. As to the claim by Dr. Ghandour that the South is helping the rebels in the north. This is not true, because in Darfur, in Kordofan and Blue Nile, there were elements of SPLA before. And then after the separation, they remained there. Now, why should they be the ones accusing us when they are hosting the enemies of the south? What was Athor doing when Khartoum sent a helicopter which we captured? What was he bringing? Bringing ammunition from Khartoum. Right now, the time I'm talking, there's somebody called David Yao Yao. He was with us. He came back after working for Khartoum. Now he has gone back to Khartoum and was given a very big reception and has promised to come back and destabilize the south. What does he mean by we helping their enemies when they are the ones having enemies, and we have the proof in the form of a helicopter and other people who have defected from their proxies?
All right, David Anderson, if I could turn back to you then, where do you see this conflict heading then if it doesn't develop into a full-scale war? Do you see this as a proxy war, a continuing proxy war with the North using rebel groups to attack the South, as the accusation has been made?
Well, I think the truth is that both sides has been supporting rebel groups against the other for some considerable time. And despite the denials on both parties, this is still going on. I think the problem now, though, has ramped up quite a bit with the Heglig incidents, because in order to end the conflict or to bring peace now, I think the North are likely to insist that the troops who've seized the oil field retreat back to the boundary settled at the CPA. I do not think the South will be willing to do that, because they were never very happy with that initial boundary. And as you've heard in your answer from the representative from Juba, they see that Heglig was in some ways stolen from them at the time of the settlement. So what I think we're seeing is the unraveling of the elements of the CPA that were not settled at the time. Abyei to the west is another area that has these problems. And I think that these loose ends were left flapping around at the time of the settlement, and they were always likely to cause problems. Now, the difficulty we have now, that if this goes into full-scale war, it will be absolutely catastrophic for the economies of both countries. The South cannot afford this by any stretch of the imagination, nor can the North. The government in the North, moreover, is already faced with some internal division and rumours of a new intifada in Khartoum. All of these rumours, by the way, are driving some of the enthusiasm in the South for trying to settle this issue once and for all. In an important sense, both sides believe that the other is weak and about to crumble. And they might both be true. And that is what's driving them to think that maybe this is the moment to try and seize the initiative. Let's
put some of that then to Atem. Atem, just in the minute that we have left. I mean, you've made it clear earlier that you don't want this to explode into a full-scale war, because clearly there is a lot for both sides to lose in that. But you've also made it clear that any solution, any negotiated solution, has to include your government's control of the Heglig oil fields. If the government in Khartoum doesn't agree to that, then what happens next?
We will still continue to negotiate, because that's the best option. We have been saying time and again that war is not in the interest of anybody. We want to establish good relations between the South and the North, so that we can trade as neighbors, as good neighbors. And this cannot happen in the state of war. So we are not for war. And as you know, it takes two to tango. So if they are aggressing us, we will just react in self-defense, but not to get involved in full-scale war.
All right,
it's not
that's
in anybody's interest.
That is going to have to be the last
stability.
word. On that note, we're going to have to leave it. Thanks very much to our guests in Juba, Atem in Oxford, David Anderson, and in Khartoum, joining us earlier, Dr. Ibrahim Ghandour. Many thanks for your time. And that's it for this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, you can email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Hazem Seeker. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.